Hi, and welcome to the Zentangle Project Pack series. My name is Molly Hollabaugh. This video is part of Project Pack 7, which also celebrates our annual 12 Days of Zentangle. This year, we are thrilled to focus on exploring shades of grays and blues on gray paper. In many of these videos, you will notice a theme of working with tangles that blossom, radiate, or in many cases create their own space, rather than fill a predefined space. These tangles or tangling techniques are exciting and often become the star of the show. Join us as we explore these concepts and have some fun at the same time. In these videos, we will use the materials that come in the Zentangle Project Pack number 7. All right, let's get started. Okay, so I have my Project Pack number 7 here, which comes with a bunch of really cool tools and a selection of our gray tiles. Today I am going to be working on a 3.5-inch square tile, a gray one, and I'm going to be using, I think, the majority of the pens and pencils that come in this set. I am going to play with a sort of an idea of using some fragments, which is really fun, and using a tangulation of a couple of tangles probably as the reticula. So this is how we're going to go. I'm going to start with this blue-black color. It's a PN, but if you have a different pen, you can work with that. And I am not going to put down a string right now. I'm going to sort of just lay down this cool reticula of using a tangle as a reticula of sorts. So if anybody is familiar with the tangle fife or maybe the tangle bales, we use a shape that's kind of like a pod shape. So I'm going to go a little bit like one stroke at a time with this, and I'm going to start by just putting down randomly 2 dots that are maybe like 1.5 inches to 2 inches apart. I can zoom in on this. And I'm simply going to draw my first pod shape connecting those 2 dots. And I want that pod shape to be kind of bigger. I don't want to make it too narrow. And then just to sort of add a little cool detail, I'm going to put a really thin aura on either side. Okay? This is going to be our basic shape for this reticula. And the way we're going to continue to add these shapes is I'm going to continue to add dots that connect. So I'm going to create another dot, and I'm going to use one of the dots from the first one, and I'm going to create a second pod shape. Again, making sure they have like some girth to them. I want them to be nice and big because we're going to be using this as a reticula, as I said. All right, I'm going to add another one. And I kind of want to play with the idea of these pod shapes kind of having different proportions. So you don't want them to be exactly the same size. So as you can see, mine are kind of big. I'm filling in the space a little bit here. I'm going to put another one here. And feel free to just watch for a minute if you're trying to get a handle on what I'm doing. That's what's great about video. So you can kind of watch for a minute. Rewatch if you want to. And then now I'm going to start to connect some that seem like kind of close together. Again, it's not with a line, it's connecting with this pod shape, okay? So really think about each stroke before you start. Okay. I think I'm going to put another one here, but it might get a little smushed there, and that's okay. The auras don't need to be perfect. They're just kind of adding a layer of interest. I might connect these two. Again, don't connect them with a line, but really think about it because we're connecting with this pod shape, okay? So just take a breath before you go to put that first stroke in down, because I think sometimes our tendency is to just draw a line. Okay. Let's see here. Maybe I'll put one here. See if I can do that. And I don't know if I can fit a little one there. I might leave that one for a minute here. Put one right here that kind of falls right to the edge. See here, I'm gonna imagine there's one right here. Kind of goes off the edge of the paper there. I'm going to make one go out here. And it's up to you how many of these you want to put in. You want to fill up your whole paper. You want to leave some white space. That's up to you. See, maybe put one more here. What do you think? All right, I think I'm gonna leave it like that for now. I can always go back and add more if I want to, but I think I'm gonna leave it like that. Okay. So this is my basic form, this kind of undulating. It's kind of similar to maybe like a fife, bales without the string there, but I'm using this as my reticula. So I'm gonna break this up into some square shapes now inside these pods. And what I mean by that is I'm gonna try this big one right here to show you. So right here, I'm gonna create a couple of dividers that leave me with some squarish space that I can put some cool fragments in. And I'm gonna go ahead and do that inside all of my pod shapes. I like to do the middle one first because I like to have that big one in the middle and then work my way out to the outsides. Just taking your time. Okay, so I have all my lines down here to divide up my spaces to create the rest of my reticula. And I'm gonna start filling these spaces with a really cool fragment. So I invite you to sort of forget about all of this other space here and let your eyes sort of focus in on just one space. And as you can see, these are squarish. They're not perfect. The tops and bottoms are a little round, and I even rounded my dividing lines a little bit just for interest. So you're going to have to imagine that this is a square-ish space. And I'm simply going to repeat that pod shape that we've been playing with. And I'm going to find the center of my square, and I'm going to draw a thinner pod shape in the center of that square. Okay? I'm going to turn my tile. I'm going to fill in that pod shape with some orbs. I like to really smush them in. So as you can see, I'm almost like inviting them to overlap a little bit, just like peas in a pod. And then I like to ink in the interstices, or the spaces in between. I'm going to turn my tile back, going upright, and I'm simply going to start to aura that cute little pod shape. And these auras kind of arc around to where I started, and I just want to do it until I reach the edges there. Okay? So that's my fragment to begin with, okay? I'm going to do the other spaces here. Again, it's a thinner pod shape. It doesn't go quite to the edges because remember, we're going to add those auras. I'm going to turn my tile. I'm going to fill in these orbs. Remember to breathe. Just relax. Okay. Then I'm going to add the auras. Doesn't matter, you could have different amounts of auras on each side. Don't worry about having the same amount. You really just want to do it until they stretch to the line. So I think the trick with this fragment is remembering that that pod shape is going to go in the center of this space, not on the lines like some other tangles might. And again, you're going to add these fun little peas in the pod, smushing them in. So I'm not really drawing like isolated circles. They're really like almost all reacting to the others. They look really smushed in there. And then just simply creating these auras that stretch right to the edge. Okay. Now, when you get to these outside spaces, you're going to have to use your imagination a little bit. And I'm going to kind of pretend it goes behind a little bit. Not too much, just a little bit. And then add those orbs. Again, those can kind of fall behind. And then add your your auras right to the edges. Do the same over here. Remember to focus at the beginning of each square when you put in your fragment and kind of think about what it is you're doing. You're going to put that pod shape in the center first. And give yourself that moment to just envision or sort of focus your eyes and figure out where it is the next stroke's going to go. Okay, so I have all those pod shapes in there like that. I'm going to show you a next step, and everybody likes to go in different order here, but I think what I'm going to do is going to show you this next step so that we can fill in the whole reticula to a certain point. I'm going to go back to my blue-black pen, and I am going to fill in these little spaces that our reticulas made. These little triangular spaces here, so that our pod shapes kind of pop out a little bit more. So I'm just kind of reacting to the space those auras made. And this drama really kind of makes those pod shapes kind of pop out a little bit more, especially with the two different blue pens. It's kind of fun. All right. So that's pretty cool, and we haven't even added any of our shading or details yet. So let's go ahead and fill that whole space just like we did that one pod. Just really appreciating kind of the repetition of the shapes, right? We have this outside pod shape, and then we're working with these inside pods. All right, so I think I've gotten almost all of these filled. I have just one left here. And as you can see, just this time taken to go back with the blue-black color and fill in these interstices really does make the pod shapes really pop out. So we have that. All right, so we got like almost our like first layer down here. I'm going to add one more kind of flair to this, and that is I'm going to pick up my gold jelly roll here. Whenever I'm working with these gold jelly rolls, I try to have like a scrap piece of paper somewhere where I can just sort of clean off the pen here and there. These gold jelly rolls have a lot of nice kind of ink that come out, so it's a fun little detail to add. So I'm actually, and you don't have to do this, but I think it's kind of fun. I'm going to go in and see if I can zoom in a little bit. I'm going to go into each one of these cool little, I guess, peas or little orbs here. And I'm just going to carefully ink them in with the gold. You don't have to go right to the edges because your eyes kind of imply that it's filling the whole thing, and then you don't go over the blue lines. So I'm just going to kind of move around the ink a little bit, barely touching the surface because that ink comes out so nicely, and you don't want to sort of mark the surface of the paper, you can just kind of just move it around really gently, and then you get a nice thick bunch of gel ink. So I'm going to go in on all of those orbs and do that now. Okay, I have almost all of my little orbs filled with gold here. So now I'm going to look at my composition, and what's cool about this Reticula that we're playing with is it sort of offers two different places to put in some tangles or fragments, or whatever you want to call them. And here we have already filled in these pod shapes with a squarish like fragment. But our Reticula has sort of offered us these triangular shapes, which if you're kind of enjoying the way your tile is, then you can leave those. But I am going to choose a triangular fragment, and I'm going to fill these little spaces and see what happens. So I think I'm going to use this blue, lighter blue pen here, this 01. And I invite you to just focus in on one of these triangular shapes to get started with. And I'm going to do a variation of a fragment that's very similar to the Tangle well. And I'm going to just simply put a sort of bud-like orb in the middle here. I think I'll do a little detail so you can zoom in a little bit on that. And with well, you kind of want to use your takeoff and land skills. And I want to circle around this orb and then land in the corner here. And a lot of times I say to myself the number 9 so that I know what direction I'm going, because the shape I'm making is kind of creating a number 9. So I'm going to land in that corner, turn my tile, do the same thing. Again, I'm going in the direction as if that were going to be a number 9, so that clockwise rotation. And around. So that is the beginning of this fragment. And I'm going to add a little detail by creating some auras or stripes that fill each space. So I'm going to go back to this number 9 shape, and I'm going to kind of radiate or aura that same stroke all the way into the corner like so. So it's a subtle curve there, but that subtle curve does help create the shape. I'm going to turn my tile. Again, I'm going to sort of mimic this number 9 shape here all the way into the corner. Remembering to breathe. Kind of cool. It's even cool with one left open, right? But I am going to fill that last space. Again, those subtle little curves here and there just add to the character of your drawing. Okay, so that is the fragment that we're going to fill into all of these little triangular spaces. You can choose to do all of them or just some of them. It doesn't really matter. It'll create another layer to our work here. All right, so I have my well-like fragment filled into all the spaces I think I want to fill. I'm sort of enjoying a little bit of white space here. I want to see what that does. I can always fill it in later if I want to, but I think I'm going to leave that just the way it is. So I think I have most of the ink down I want down for right now, and I'm going to begin adding a little bit of shades of grays and blues and see what happens. So I'm going to show you what I'm going to do to the pod first, and then we can go ahead and do all those. I'm going to start with my graphite pencil and see if I can zoom in a little bit here for you guys. And I'm going to just add some dark graphite to the outsides just to add a little sort of rounding to the shape, almost as if these look like they're really digging into the pod. Notice how this just subtle aura that we added in the beginning really adds to the overall look of that. So it's funny how you just add one little step and it can change everything. So I like to buff things out a little bit in between. So I'm going to take my tortillon and just really softly buff out that graphite. All about layers here. You can always go back and add more or less. So if you're timid, don't worry about it. All right, so even just that, look at that with the difference to the other ones has added so much. I'm gonna add a little bit of this blue now, just for some interest. And so right on the edge of where that graphite started to get lighter, just adding a nice soft bit of blue there right over the edge of the graphite and then into where it starts to get white. So I'm pressing pretty hard and making sure to use the side of that pencil. And then you can go ahead and it doesn't even, if you use the side, you probably don't need to work it in too much. It's got a nice blue hue there. That's really pretty. Ooh, it's getting exciting. And then lastly, we're gonna use the white. The white is usually what makes things kind of pop. And they go in where the inside pods get a little fatter. I'm kind of skipping over the gold because I don't think it needs anything. And just adding this white in the middle. In this case, I don't think I'm gonna need to go over it with my tortillon at all. All right, so it's kind of fun to get one all done like that and compare it to the others, because you can see how much that shading process changes it. So I'm going to go ahead and do all my paws now, and then we'll go in and add the graphite or whatever it is to these triangular spaces. Just putting my last finishing touches on here with my white charcoal. I just love the way this kind of like slowly comes alive with all the layers. You get that white, the deep blues, almost black with the graphite. Super fun. Okay. So now I have to put something in to kind of bring my little triangular pieces to a finishing point. And I think I'm just gonna play with a little bit of graphite, and we'll see. I might add some charcoal afterwards. So I think what I'm gonna do is first go around, and if you look closely at this fragment, which is a fun one, you kind of get this cool little overlapping effect. And I'm just gonna put a little tiny bit of graphite in the corners, and then literally just like one stroke of my pencil line right underneath to get that effect. Can you see that? Here, let's do another one. Just a little graphite in the corner, stroke towards the center. All right, and then take your tortillon that you've been using for your graphite. Just invite it a little bit, doesn't take much. Depending on how much room you have, you might just add a little bit of chalk there. If it's too tiny, you might not be able to do it. But if you do, you can add a little bit. It's kind of cool. I love that. So I'm going to go in and fill all of my fragments just like that. All right, so I got, I think, all my graphite and highlights where I want them in the ones between. This thing's coming together pretty well. I'm pretty psyched about it. Let's see, trying to figure out if there's any finishing touches. I like these middle parts to be nice and dark. That's kind of a nice way to get contrast. So sometimes I'll go back in and do that. And then right before I'm done, a lot of times I'll go back in with my pen and just create a little bit of finishing touches. I think in this situation, I'm sort of enjoying how it lays out on my paper. So I'm just going to go in and add a little bit of rounding. It looks like I already did it here a little bit, just to create a little contrast on the edges. So just where these come together, just sort of adding some ink there. Tiny bit. At this point, I sometimes go back in and just redefine some spaces, darken it a tiny bit, just going over those lines that maybe got dulled by some of the graphite and chalk. Not much, just enough to kind of darken it up. You can see how that just adds to the composition. All right, I'm pretty happy with this. I'm going to zoom out a little bit, kind of check out where I'm at. I think I'm done. Wow, that's pretty fun. I'm going to throw my chop on over here. I'm pretty happy with that. Well, thanks for joining me on these 12 Days of Zentangle 2019, and we'll see you next time.